Midnight Drearies.
Roberto Duce had always been a huge fan of David Bowie, ever since he was a little boy growing up in a small town in Italy. He had spent countless hours listening to his music and watching his music videos, dreaming of one day being able to sing and perform just like him. Years went by, and Roberto never lost his love for Bowie. In fact, he had become so obsessed with the legendary musician that he decided to become a David Bowie impersonator. He practiced tirelessly, working on his voice and his stage presence until he became one of the best Bowie impersonators around. Roberto was a big guy, much bigger than Bowie ever was. But when he sang, he sounded exactly like him. People were amazed by his performances, and he quickly became a popular act for corporate events and private parties. One evening, Roberto was finishing up a paid gig at the Microsoft office building in Detroit. They had flown him in just for the occasion. He stepped out back into the alley to have a smoke, feeling exhilarated after his performance. As he lit up his cigarette, he heard footsteps approaching. At first, Roberto wasn't afraid. He was a big guy, and he knew how to take care of himself. But as the figure stepped closer, he realized that there was something not quite right about him. He was tall and thin, with long spindly arms and legs that seemed to move unnaturally. His face was obscured by the shadows, but Roberto could see that it was twisted into a grotesque grin. Roberto took a step back, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. He was about to turn and run when he saw the monster looming up behind the shadowy figure. It was like nothing he had ever seen before, a mass of writhing tentacles and gaping maws, with eyes that glowed an eerie green. Roberto's instincts took over, and he turned and fled down the alley. He could hear the shadowy figure singing behind him, his voice echoing through the narrow passageway. "Turn and face the strange," he sang over and over again. But Roberto didn't want to face the strange. He just wanted to get away from it. He ran faster and faster, his legs pumping as he tried to put as much distance between himself and the diabolic duo as possible. But the alley was a dead end, and Roberto found himself trapped. He could hear the monster closing in behind him, its tentacles flailing as it slithered closer. Panic set in, and Roberto felt his throat constricting. He was going to die here, alone in this dark alley, torn apart by a monster from another world. And all because he had wanted to be like David Bowie. But then, something strange happened. The shadowy figure stepped out from the darkness, his face still hidden from view. "I just wanted to say what a wonderful performance that was," he said, his voice calm and measured. "You sound just like him. I'll definitely be at your next show." Roberto was confused. He had just been chased by a monster, and now this strange figure was complimenting him on his singing. It made no sense. But before he could say anything, the figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows once more. Roberto was left alone in the alley, panting and sweating. He didn't know what to make of what had just happened, but one thing was clear: he needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. He turned and ran back the way he had come, and went back inside, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't tell anyone about what had happened. He was afraid that they would think he was crazy or that he had made it all up. But the experience had shaken him to his core. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that there was more to the shadowy figure and the monster than he had first realized. Over the next few weeks, Roberto found himself growing increasingly paranoid. He would hear strange noises in the middle of the night, and he would see shadows moving at the edge of his vision. He tried to tell himself that it was all in his head, that he was just imagining things. But the fear continued to grow, until he couldn't ignore it anymore. One night, Roberto was lying in bed, trying to sleep. But every time he closed his eyes, he could see the shadowy figure and the monster, looming over him. He sat up, his heart racing. He couldn't take it anymore. He had to know what was going on. Without thinking, he got out of bed and made his way to the door. He opened it and stepped out into the hallway, his bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. As he made his way down the hallway, he could hear strange noises coming from the other end of the apartment building. They sounded like whispers, but he couldn't make out what they were saying. He turned the corner and saw someone standing at the end of the hallway. It was the shadowy figure, his face still hidden from view by his black hoodie of the band died mysteriously. Roberto felt his heart skip a beat. He tried to turn and run, but his legs wouldn't move. He was frozen in place, unable to escape. The figure stepped closer, until he was standing right in front of Roberto. He could see now that there was something wrong with his eyes. They were black, with no whites or pupils. Roberto tried to scream, but no sound came out. He was trapped, with nowhere to run. But then, something strange happened. The figure reached out and placed a hand on Roberto's shoulder. And in that moment, all of the fear and anxiety that had been building up inside him just vanished. He felt a sense of calm wash over him, like a warm blanket wrapping around his shoulders. He looked at the figure, and saw that his eyes had changed. They were now a bright, shining blue. "I just wanted to say thank you," the figure said, his voice soft and gentle. "Thank you for bringing David Bowie's music back to life. You have no idea how much it means to me." Roberto felt his eyes fill with tears. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew that he was safe now. The figure smiled at him and said, "We are all black stars," then turned and walked away. As he disappeared into the shadows, Roberto felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He went back to bed, feeling exhausted but somehow renewed. And when he woke up the next morning, he knew that everything was going to be okay. From that day forward, Roberto continued to perform as David Bowie, but with a newfound sense of purpose. He knew that he was doing something important, something that touched people's hearts and souls. And he knew that he had nothing to fear, not from the shadowy figure or the monster that had chased him down the alley. Because he had faced his fears, and he had come out the other side stronger and more resilient than ever before.